Hello everyone. Before diving into this topic, I've got to clarify something. I am reading some of the pieces that I'm producing, and that means that these are things that I wrote. The reason I'm doing that rather than speaking extemporaneously is because now and then, if I'm pushing myself to the limits of my conceptual ability, then I have to choose my words with the undue care that writing allows. And I suppose that has the disadvantage that's associated with reading something rather than speaking off the cuff, but the advantage of precision and care. So today I'm going to read a piece that I entitled, "Why Twitter is Insane." It is often said that social media is driving us out of our minds, individually and collectively. Is this true? And if so, how and why? The eminent social psychologist Jonathan Haidt recently wrote a hard-hitting article showing that use of certain forms of social media, particularly by girls just entering adolescence, was directly and causally associated with higher rates of depression and depression-related symptoms since the early to mid-2010s. I had been thinking along broadly similar lines, particularly with regard to Twitter and how its incentives are structured compared to those that characterize healthy human interactions. The extent of its harmful pathology has recently been brought home to me as a consequence of those deliberations. A thought experiment. Imagine, for example, that you learned a particular pattern of communication in your family, one that, when used on others, triggered a passive or even outright aggressive resistance. By definition, the unusual method of communication you had been taught, one that did not generalize well to the broader social environment, would characterize you, at least as far as society is concerned, as insane. Now, let's ask, how does Twitter, like that family, differ from the real world in how it requires us to communicate with each other? How does it make us, too, insane? The first way is in the manner in which it bypasses the traditional means for measuring the quality of communication. In the real world, high-volume communication is extremely costly, requiring both hard-to-establish credibility. Why otherwise would large numbers of people want to read or listen to you? And access to the wealth necessary for such communication, either directly through personal accumulation or by proxy, such as a contractual arrangement with a publishing house. Twitter casts these limitations asunder. The consequence of this demolition of potentially vital regulation is multiplied by the fact that Twitter provides universal access to each of its users' hard-won personal networks. The second way is how anyone, regardless of competence or social status, can comment to anyone else's entire network of followers merely by commenting on something the latter posted. That same commenter, therefore, can access all those who have chosen to follow not them, but the target of their, say, insult and derision, without having demonstrated any of the competence necessary to have attracted such attention on their own. This democratization of communication enables a parasitism completely divorced from competence. It massively inflates noise relative to signal, bypassing all the screening mechanisms that have been so painstakingly developed to shield us from incessant racket in the real world. The third way Twitter breaks the norms of standard human interaction is the zero cost and even potential benefit it imposes on those who engage in flagrant ethical misconduct. It facilitates the implied moral elevation that accrues to the accuser who adopts the position of virtuous judge merely by formulating an accusation, however vague, ill-founded, and scurrilous. In the same vein, there is no cost for insults, ad hominem attacks, and provocative statements incitement, in other words, people can hide behind their anonymity as well and act, if possible, even more brazenly. Too often, therefore, the medium stimulates a reactive rage, as it denies even to competent users two of the main privileges traditionally granted to them: the presumption of innocence and the right and ability to engage in effective self-defense.